The unimaginable reward, the city did not let go of Maya's story. Days turned into weeks, yet her name remained on people's lips. Newspapers carried her picture, online articles dissected her every word, and talk shows debated whether true selflessness still existed in a world consumed by ambition. Strangers stopped her on the street, thanking her, praising her, sometimes even weeping as they told her how her courage had reminded them of their own humanity. Maya accepted it all with humility, but in private she still returned each night to her small apartment, counting coins, patching worn clothes, and praying over her daughter as she slept. Fame did not erase bills, and admiration did not keep the landlord's threats at bay. At the hospital, Ethan's health improved steadily. By the time he was able to walk again, his bond with Maya had deepened into something neither of them could quite name. There was a trust, an unspoken connection forged by fire long ago and rekindled by fate in the station. He often asked about Illa, about Maya's struggles, and though she tried to shield him from the harder truths, he could see the fatigue in her eyes, the way she carried the weight of 2 lives on her shoulders. One morning, as sunlight spilled through the blinds, Ethan requested a press conference. His mother objected, the family's advisors panicked, but he insisted. When the day arrived, cameras filled the hospital auditorium, reporters buzzing with questions. Ethan entered slowly, leaning on a cane, but his voice carried strength as he addressed the crowd. "I stand before you alive today because one woman refused to walk away. While hundreds passed by, she chose to stop. While others protected their time, she gave hers freely. She did not care who I was, what I owned, or what my name meant. She saw a human being in need and risked her own future to help me." He paused, his gaze sweeping the crowd before settling on Maya seated quietly at the edge of the room. "Her name is Maya Williams, and she is more than the woman who saved my life. She is proof that compassion can still change the course of this world." The room erupted in flashes of cameras and the rustle of pens. Reporters shouted questions, but Ethan raised his hand, silencing them. "You ask what I owe her. You ask what she seeks. The truth is, she asked for nothing. But I cannot ignore the debt I carry. So today I announce the creation of the Williams Foundation, dedicated to providing scholarships for single mothers and children in underprivileged communities. It will begin with an endowment from my family, and Maya Williams will serve as its director." The words struck Maya like a wave, stealing her breath. She had not expected this. She had not dared to dream of anything beyond surviving the month, beyond keeping her daughter's school fees paid. Now, in one moment, her sacrifice had blossomed into something far larger than she could have imagined. A chance not only to lift her own life, but to change countless others. The reporters turned to her, shouting questions, but Maya's mind blurred. She felt Ethan's mother's eyes on her, sharp and searching, yet something in that gaze had softened. For the first time there was no disdain, no icy distance, only a reluctant acknowledgement that Maya's place in this story could not be denied. That night, back in her apartment, Maya sat with Illa on her lap, the glow of the city lights spilling through the cracked blinds. Letters and emails had poured in from women across the country, sharing their struggles, their sacrifices, their hopes. The foundation was already taking shape, its purpose stretching beyond her own life. She looked at her daughter, who was coloring on the table, her small hands careful as she sketched a picture of a woman holding another's hand. "Mama," Illa asked softly, "are you really going to help other kids like me?" Maya kissed her forehead, her eyes glistening. "Yes, baby. We're going to make sure no child has to feel like the world forgot about them." In the weeks that followed, doors that had always been closed began to open. The law firms that once dismissed her now extended offers, though she no longer needed them. Charities invited her to speak. Universities sought her guidance, and women she had never met called her their inspiration. Through it all, Maya remained grounded, her heart tied to the simple truth that had guided her in Grand Central. One life was worth more than any missed opportunity. Ethan, still regaining his strength, became her ally in the foundation's work. They attended events together, their names spoken in the same breath, and though whispers circled about their closeness, neither paid them much mind. What mattered was the mission they carried, the lives they touched. Even his mother, once a wall of resistance, began to lend her influence quietly, as if conceding that perhaps she had misjudged the woman who had saved her son. Months later, on the anniversary of the day she had missed her train, Maya returned to Grand Central. She stood in the same place, the noise of the station swirling around her. For a moment she closed her eyes, hearing again the cruel words of passers-by, the announcement of the departing train, the desperate whisper, "Help me." She opened her eyes and smiled faintly. That day she had thought she had lost everything, but in truth she had gained a life she could never have dreamed of. As she turned to leave, Illa ran up beside her, holding her hand, her laughter echoing through the hall. And for the first time in years, Maya felt the weight lift completely. She had sacrificed what she thought was her only chance, only to discover that destiny had been waiting with something far greater. The unimaginable had become her reality. Not wealth, not status, but the power to change lives, starting with her own and her daughter's. And in the end, that was the truest reward of all. The transformation. The knock at the door echoed in Maya's chest long after the reporters had gone. She had not let them in, had not answered their endless stream of questions shouted over the hum of the camera, but their presence had already pierced the fragile shell of her life. Neighbors peeked from their windows. Whispers began to ripple through the building, and by the next morning her phone was buzzing with calls from numbers she did not recognize. Some were journalists, others opportunists. A few even strangers offering help. She ignored them all, clutching her phone tightly, as if silence alone could shield her daughter from the storm that had been unleashed. When she arrived at the hospital that day, she realized the storm had followed her there. A cluster of reporters gathered at the entrance, their cameras flashing, their voices overlapping in a chorus of curiosity and demand. "Maya Williams, over here! Do you regret missing your interview? Do you think Ethan Hale owes you something? Are you hoping for compensation?" The questions jabbed like needles, each one twisting the narrative until her selfless acts seemed reduced to suspicion. Maya lowered her head, shielded her daughter's photograph that peeked from her purse, and pushed her way through the chaos, her heart pounding with fear. Inside, the nurses looked at her with a mixture of sympathy and caution. Some smiled gently, others avoided her gaze as if unsure whether she was a heroine or a complication. When she entered Ethan's room, she found him sitting upright for the first time, his color returning, his strength slowly crawling back. His face lit when he saw her, but his expression dimmed quickly as he noticed the exhaustion in her eyes. "They found you, didn't they?" he asked softly, his voice still hoarse. Maya nodded, sinking into the chair beside him. "I never wanted this, Ethan. I just wanted to do the right thing. Now they're treating me like I'm chasing something, like I'm trying to climb into a world that doesn't belong to me." Ethan leaned forward, his hand reaching for hers. "The truth is stronger than their questions. You don't have to justify your heart to anyone." Before Maya could respond, the door opened and once again his mother entered. This time, however, her expression carried something new. Not only disapproval, but unease. She closed the door behind her, her pearls catching the light as she crossed the room. "The story is spreading faster than we can contain it," she said sharply. "You've become a symbol, Miss Williams, whether you intended to or not. People are talking, papers are printing, and the name Maya Williams is no longer just a name, it's a headline." Maya's stomach clenched. She had not asked for this. She had not sought to be a symbol, yet the weight of her choice had grown beyond her, a ripple that had reached shores she had never imagined. Ethan's mother continued, her tone measured. "There are those who see this as a story of sacrifice and courage, but there are others who see opportunity in tearing it apart. They will dig into your past, your finances, your family. They will try to find anything that discredits you. And when they do, it will not only stain you, but reflect on us as well." The warning struck deep, but Ethan interrupted, his voice firm despite his weakness. "Then let them try. What she did cannot be erased. It will outshine whatever shadows they dig up." His mother's lips tightened, but for the first time she did not argue. Instead, she turned to Maya, her eyes sharp but not unkind. "You must decide what you want. To disappear back into obscurity, or to stand in the light that is now upon you. Either way, the choice will change everything." That night, Maya sat by her apartment window again, staring at the skyline, her daughter asleep beside her with crayons scattered across the floor. She thought about the life she had fought for. A steady job, a safe home, a chance for Illa to dream bigger. She thought about the faces at the station that had walked away, about the burn scar on Ethan's wrist, about the strangers now calling her name as if it belonged to them. And she thought about her mother gone too soon, who had once told her, "The right thing will never be the easy thing, but it will always be the thing that lasts." The next morning, Maya made her choice. When the reporters returned, she did not hide. She stood on the steps of the hospital, the cameras flashing, the microphones raised, and she spoke with a steady voice that surprised even herself. She told them the truth, that she had been on her way to an interview that could have changed her life, that she had chosen instead to save a man because she could not bear to watch him die, that she did not regret it, though it had cost her everything she had worked for, and that the only thing she wanted now was for her daughter to grow up in a world where people did not walk past one another in their hour of need. Her words spread like wildfire. Within hours, news outlets replayed her speech, commentators debated her selflessness, and strangers flooded social media with messages of admiration. Some called her a hero, others questioned her motives. But the story was alive, pulsing through the veins of the city, impossible to silence. Back in his hospital room, Ethan watched her on the television mounted to the wall, his eyes glistening with pride. His mother stood behind him, her arms crossed, her face unreadable. When the broadcast ended, Ethan turned to her and said simply, "Do you see now? She's not just some woman who stumbled into my life. She is the reason I'm here. And whether you approve or not, I owe her more than gratitude." For the first time, his mother did not answer. She looked away, her silence speaking louder than words. And as the city buzzed with her name, Maya returned home that evening to find envelopes slid under her door, letters from strangers, some offering help, others sharing their own stories of sacrifice and survival. She sat at the kitchen table, tears slipping down her cheeks as she read them, Ela climbing into her lap asking, "Mama, why are people writing to you?" "Because," Maya whispered, holding her daughter close. "Sometimes the world remembers when you choose kindness." What Maya did not yet know was that her story had reached not only the people of the city, but boardrooms, charities, and leaders who were moved by her words. And soon the unimaginable would begin to unfold. The revelation. The rain had stopped by the time Maya stepped out of the bus that evening, but the city still smelled of damp concrete and exhaust. Her shoes were soaked from the puddles she had waded through earlier, and the thin soles offered little comfort against the chill seeping up from the ground. She pulled her daughter's hand tighter in hers as they walked up the cracked steps of their apartment building, the fluorescent light above the entrance flickering with a sickly glow. Ela skipped beside her, humming softly, oblivious to the heaviness weighing down her mother's shoulders. For a moment, Maya wished she could borrow her daughter's innocence, that simple ability to see only the brightness of the world and not its shadows. Inside, the apartment felt even smaller than usual. The peeling paint on the walls, the steady drip from the bathroom faucet, the radiator that clanked but never truly warmed the room. These were constants of Maya's life, reminders of how close they always lived to the edge. She hung up her coat, wrung out her damp scarf, and sat Ela at the kitchen table with a glass of milk. As her daughter chatted about her school day, Maya forced a smile, but her mind was elsewhere. She had lost the interview, lost her chance at security, and though she tried to remind herself that saving Ethan had been the right thing, the sting of consequence gnawed at her relentlessly. That night, after Ela had fallen asleep, Maya sat by the window staring out at the city skyline. Somewhere across that sea of lights, Ethan was recovering in a private hospital room surrounded by the finest care money could buy. She, meanwhile, was counting coins in her purse, calculating whether they could stretch to cover groceries for the week. It was a cruel contrast, one that made her question the invisible lines dividing people's lives, the lines of wealth, power, and privilege that determined who was allowed to dream and who was forced to survive. The next morning, Maya returned to the hospital as she always did, carrying with her the gnawing guilt of leaving Ela with Mrs. Green yet again. Ethan's face brightened when she entered, and for a moment the heaviness lifted. He asked about her daughter, listened as she spoke of Ila's love for drawing, and smiled with a warmth that softened his features. But their quiet conversation was cut short when the door opened and two sharply dressed men in suits entered the room. Their presence was not warm like Ethan's, but cold, clinical, the type of men who carried authority not by words but by the weight of the institutions they represented. "Mr. Hale," one of them began, his tone respectful but brisk, "we've been contacted by the press. They've caught wind of what happened at Grand Central. A woman saved your life. Reporters want to know more." His eyes flicked to Maya briefly, assessing her like an object under glass. "We need to control the narrative before it spirals." Maya's breath caught. She had never imagined that her actions would attract attention beyond that crowded station. She had simply done what her conscience demanded. Now the idea of her name, her face being dragged into headlines, filled her with unease. Ethan, however, leaned forward, his voice firm despite the weakness in his lungs. Control the narrative? There's no narrative to control. The truth is simple. She saved me when no one else would. If the press wants to know, that's what they'll hear. The men exchanged uneasy glances. With respect, sir, your family's reputation is delicate. We need to be cautious about who gets associated with your name. The sting of those words sank deep into Maya's skin. She understood what they meant without them saying it outright. People like her, poor black single mother, they feared her presence would stain their polished world, that her story was not one of inspiration but of scandal. Before Maya could speak, the door opened again, and Ethan's mother swept in. Her presence immediately shifted the room, her voice sharp as she addressed the men. "That will be all," she said, dismissing them with a flick of her hand. The men bowed their heads and left, leaving silence in their wake. She turned to Ethan then, her eyes blazing. "You cannot allow this woman to be paraded before the press. Do you understand what this could mean for you? For us?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "Mother, what it means is that the world will know there is still decency left in it. She deserves to be recognized, not hidden." His mother's gaze darted to Maya, cold and cutting. "And what do you want, Miss Williams? Fame, money? To be lifted from your world into ours on the back of a single act?" Maya's breath caught, and for a moment anger flared inside her. She rose to her feet, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. "I don't want anything. I didn't do it for recognition or reward. I did it because no one else would. I did it because I couldn't stand by and watch someone die." Her eyes met the older woman's without flinching. "If that offends you, then that says more about you than it does about me." The room went still, the words hanging heavy between them. For the first time, Ethan's mother seemed genuinely taken aback, her composure faltering. She studied Maya in silence, as though reassessing her entirely. Before finally turning on her heel and leaving without another word, Ethan's gaze softened as it fell on Maya, admiration flickering in his tired eyes. "You have more courage than most people I've ever known. But courage would not pay the rent. Courage would not buy groceries or cover Illa's tuition." That truth pressed on Maya even as Ethan's words warmed her heart. She left the hospital that night feeling both proud and defeated, knowing that while she had stood her ground, the realities of her life remained unchanged. The next morning, as she prepared breakfast in her small kitchen, the knock on the door startled her. She opened it to find a reporter standing there, microphone in hand, a camera crew behind him. "Miss Williams?" he asked eagerly. "We'd like to hear your side of the story. The city deserves to know about the woman who sacrificed her future to save Ethan Hale." Maya froze in the doorway, her heart thundering. The world she had tried to keep small and safe for her daughter was about to be thrust into the spotlight. And though she had never sought recognition, she realized now that her choice at Grand Central had set events into motion that she could no longer control. Unseen connections. The following days blurred together in a haze of exhaustion and quiet dread. Maya balanced precariously between two worlds: the fluorescent corridors of St. Mary's Hospital where Ethan recovered, and the fragile life she had left behind in her cramped apartment in Brooklyn. Each morning she dropped Illa off at her neighbor Mrs. Green's, kissed her daughter's forehead and whispered promises she wasn't sure she could keep. Then she rode the bus back into the city, her nerves raw, her heart pulled toward the hospital like a magnet she couldn't resist. Ethan's improvement was steady but slow. The asthma attack had left him weak, his lungs battered, his energy drained. Yet whenever Maya entered the room, he seemed to find some spark, greeting her with a faint smile that always startled her. She wasn't family, she wasn't anyone of importance in his life until days ago, and yet he held her presence as if it mattered. Perhaps it did, but if Ethan found comfort in her company, his mother did not. The woman's visits were a storm of disapproval, her elegant heels striking the tiles like a gavel of judgment. Each time she arrived, Maya felt the weight of her scrutiny, a silent condemnation wrapped in pearls and silk. She never raised her voice, never descended into vulgarity, but her disapproval seeped into every look, every clipped word. On the third day, the confrontation finally came. Maya had just returned with a cup of weak hospital coffee when Mrs. Hale entered, her posture regal, her chin lifted high. She stopped at the foot of the bed, her sharp eyes sweeping over Maya before fixing on her son. "Ethan," she said coolly, "I need to speak with you privately." Ethan's gaze shifted to Maya, then back to his mother. His voice was tired but firm. "Anything you have to say, you can say in front of her." A flash of anger lit his mother's eyes, but she swallowed it quickly, replacing it with a smile that was more blade than warmth. "Very well, if that's how you wish it." She turned to Maya, her words precise, deliberate. "Miss Williams, I'm sure your intentions are pure, but let us be honest. Your presence here is unnecessary. My son has the best doctors, the best nurses, and his family. He doesn't need a stranger from the street clinging to his bedside." Maya's chest tightened, but before she could speak, Ethan interjected. "She's not a stranger, Mother. She's the one who saved my life when no one else would lift a hand, and she's not leaving just because it bruises your pride." The silence that followed was suffocating. Mrs. Hale's jaw tightened, her composure straining against her fury. "Do you know what you're doing?" she asked sharply. "Inviting someone into your life without understanding who they are, what they want." Her eyes narrowed on Maya, cutting like glass. "People always want something, Ethan. Don't be so naive." The accusation burned in Maya's chest, shame and anger twisting together. She wanted to defend herself, to shout that she hadn't asked for anything, that she had lost more than she had gained. But the words tangled in her throat, heavy with years of being dismissed, underestimated, and judged by appearances alone. Ethan's response came swift and sure. "If you knew her story, you wouldn't speak that way." His gaze softened as it met Maya's, and he added, "She already gave up more than you can imagine." Maya's eyes widened. He didn't know about the interview, not fully. She had mentioned it vaguely, but not in detail. Yet somehow he sensed it, the depth of the sacrifice she had made. Mrs. Hale drew herself taller, her pearls catching the light. "Very well," she said coldly. "If you insist on entertaining this friendship, that is your choice. But remember, Ethan, choices have consequences." With that, she turned sharply and swept from the room, her perfume lingering like a warning. Maya sank into the chair, her hands trembling. She hated how small she felt, how powerless in the presence of a woman who seemed to command the world with a glance. She looked at Ethan, her voice breaking. "She thinks I'm here for something, that I want something from you. But I don't, I couldn't leave you there." "I know," Ethan said softly, his hand reaching for hers. "And that's why it matters." That night Maya returned home drained, her spirit heavy with the weight of judgment. Ila was already asleep, her tiny body curled on the worn sofa, her school books scattered around her like fragile shields against the world. Maya kissed her daughter's forehead, whispering, "One day it'll be better. I promise." But even as she said the words, she wondered if they were lies. The next morning brought another blow. Her phone rang with an unfamiliar number, and when she answered, the clipped voice on the other end confirmed her fears. "Miss Williams, this is Grant and Spencer Law Associates. We regret to inform you that, due to your absence, your application is no longer under consideration." Maya thanked them numbly and hung up, her heart sinking like stone. It was official now. The opportunity was gone, the door slammed shut. Her sacrifice had cost her the future she had worked so hard to reach, and yet when she returned to the hospital later that day, Ethan's face lit up at the sight of her. For a fleeting moment, she wondered if perhaps she hadn't lost everything. Perhaps fate was weaving something she could not yet see. But she also knew the world did not give without taking. And the presence of Ethan's powerful, disapproving family was a storm gathering on the horizon, a storm that threatened to sweep her and her daughter into chaos she had never imagined. The consequences, the sterile air of St. Mary's Hospital clung to Maya's skin like a second, suffocating layer. For hours she sat in that hard plastic chair outside Ethan's room, her hands resting on her lap, the soaked fabric of her blazer slowly drying into stiff wrinkles. Time stretched mercilessly, measured only by the click of nurses' shoes and the soft hum of machines behind closed doors. Each passing minute reminded her that she was supposed to be somewhere else, on the 14th floor of a glass building downtown, shaking hands, answering questions, proving that she was worthy of a future she had dreamed of for years. The interview was over now, long gone, and with it the fragile lifeline she had been clinging to. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, pulling her from her thoughts. She glanced at the screen and saw the landlord's name flashing like a warning. Her stomach knotted. She knew what that call meant. Rent overdue again, threats laced with false patience. She pressed decline, sliding the phone back with trembling fingers. She could not face him right now. Not after everything. Not with exhaustion pounding through her body and her mind clouded by questions she could not answer. When the door to Ethan's room finally opened, Maya looked up to see his mother step out. The woman carried herself with the grace of someone who had never known struggle, her pearls gleaming under the harsh fluorescent lights. She glanced at Maya briefly, her eyes narrowing with quiet judgment before she swept past without a word, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. Maya felt the sting of that dismissal deep in her chest. She had expected gratitude or at least acknowledgement, but instead she felt invisible, unwanted. Moments later, a nurse ushered Maya inside. Ethan sat propped against the pillows, pale but awake, his gaze heavy with fatigue yet softened by something almost tender when it fell on her. The oxygen mask had been removed, replaced by a thin nasal tube, and though his breaths were still shallow, they no longer carried the desperate rasp from before. "You stayed," he said, his voice quiet, edged with disbelief. "Of course I stayed," Maya replied, though part of her wanted to collapse into tears. "I couldn't just walk away." Ethan studied her for a long moment as though searching for something hidden in her expression. Then with a faint smile he whispered, "I remember you." Maya froze, her breath catching in her throat. You do?" His hand shifted slightly against the blanket, fingers curling weakly as if reaching for hers. "Brooklyn, the fire. You were just a child, and your mother. I carried you both out. I never forgot that night." Tears blurred Maya's vision. For years she had wondered if he remembered, or if she had only been a fleeting shadow in the chaos of his youth. To hear him say it, to know that the memory had lived in him as it had lived in her, felt like a thread of fate pulled taut between them. Before she could respond, the door swung open again and Ethan's mother returned. Her eyes flicked between her son and Maya and her mouth tightened. "Ethan, you need rest." The doctor said no stress, no unnecessary conversation. She turned to Maya, her tone clipped and polite in a way that carried no warmth. "Miss Williams, was it? You've done your part. The hospital staff can take care of him now." Maya stood slowly, her heart pounding. She wanted to argue, to insist that Ethan himself had asked her to stay. But the weight of the older woman's disapproval pressed down like iron. She felt small under that gaze, as though every threadbare detail of her life was exposed. The second-hand blazer, the fraying shoes, the absence of wealth or influence. But before she could speak, Ethan interjected, his voice firmer than before. "Mother, she saved my life. She's not leaving because you said so. She stays because I want her here." The word stunned the room into silence. Ethan's mother's lips parted, shock flashing across her carefully controlled features. For the first time, Maya saw her composure falter. She adjusted her coat, regaining her poise, and replied coolly, "Very well, but don't mistake a moment of gratitude for permanence." Her eyes met Maya's sharp and warning. Then she turned and left again, her heels echoing down the corridor. Maya sank back into the chair beside Ethan's bed, her heart racing. "You didn't have to do that," she murmured. "I wanted to," Ethan said simply, his gaze steady. "People walk past others every day pretending not to see. You didn't. You remind me that humanity isn't lost." He paused, coughing lightly, then added, "But you paid a price, didn't you? You missed something important." The truth of his words struck her like a blow. Tears welled in her eyes as she whispered, "My interview. The one chance I had to change everything for me and my daughter." She bit her lip, ashamed of the bitterness in her voice. "But what was I supposed to do? Watch you die?" Ethan's expression softened, sorrow flickering in his eyes. "You made the choice no one else would. I won't forget that." Maya looked down, her fingers twisting in her lap. "I don't regret it," she said quietly, "but I don't know what comes next." As the night deepened, Maya dozed in the chair, exhaustion overtaking her. She dreamed of flames, of smoke, of the little girl she had once been and the little girl she now raised. She dreamed of doors closing, trains departing, opportunities vanishing into the distance. And when she woke, the first pale light of dawn was seeping through the blinds, and Ethan was watching her with a gaze that seemed to hold both gratitude and something unspoken. What Maya did not know was that outside that room, decisions were already being made, decisions that would pit her sacrifice against the expectations of a powerful family, decisions that would test her resolve more than any job interview ever could. The stranger's identity. The ambulance rattled through the rain-slicked streets of New York, sirens echoing between towering buildings. Maya sat hunched on the narrow bench beside the stretcher, clutching the man's hand as if it were her anchor in the storm. His chest rose unevenly beneath the oxygen mask, each breath shallow but steadier than before. The paramedics worked with calm urgency, checking his vitals, adjusting the mask, preparing injections that Maya could barely understand. She sat there soaked and trembling, her blazer plastered to her skin, her resume folder gone, her entire future dissolving in the pools of rain left behind at Grand Central. But even in the chaos, her eyes never left the man's scarred wrist. That faint line burned into his skin like a ghost from her childhood. She was 9 again in her mind, the memory as sharp as broken glass. Flames climbing the peeling wallpaper of her Brooklyn apartment, smoke choking the air. Her mother's cough rattling through the dark. She had thought they were going to die that night, pressed against the door as the fire grew hotter, the heat blistering. And then he had appeared, an older boy, hardly more than a teenager, but strong and fearless. He had kicked the door down, wrapped his arms around her mother and her, and carried them through the smoke into the bitter night air. The fire truck arrived minutes later, but it had been his hands, his bravery that saved them. She had never seen him again, only heard her mother whisper his name, Ethan Hale. Now, decades later, she looked at the unconscious man and felt the same unshakable pull of fate. Could it truly be him? The city was vast, people came and went like shadows, but something inside her knew this was no coincidence. She held his hand tighter, whispering, "Don't you dare leave me now, not after everything." When the ambulance screeched into the emergency bay, hospital staff rushed forward. Nurses and orderlies swung open the back doors, pulling the stretcher out with practiced speed. Maya stumbled after them, soaked shoes squeaking against the tiles as they wheeled him into the fluorescent-lit corridors. The antiseptic sting in the air made her dizzy, or perhaps it was the weight of what she had just lost. She was supposed to be downtown right now, smoothing her resume pages, waiting for her name to be called. Instead, she was dripping rainwater onto the linoleum floor of St. Mary's Hospital. Following a stranger, no, not a stranger, into the unknown. "Miss, you can't go in there," a nurse said firmly as they rolled Ethan through swinging double doors. I have to," Maya stammered, her voice breaking. "He asked me not to leave." The nurse gave her a look that was both kind and immovable. "They'll stabilize him. If you care, then wait. That's the best help you can give right now." Maya nodded weakly, though her body screamed to follow. She collapsed into a plastic chair in the waiting area, her blazer clinging to her, her breath coming in shallow bursts. She pressed her hands together, her knuckles whitening. She had always believed in doing the right thing, even when the cost was high. But now that the cost had truly come due, fear gnawed at her insides. What if the job had been her one shot? What if the landlord called tomorrow demanding rent she didn't have? What if Ila's school fees fell through, her dreams crushed before they even began? Her chest heaved, and for a moment she hated herself for helping. Why couldn't I just walk away like everyone else? She thought bitterly. But almost as quickly, shame flooded her. That wasn't who she was. That wasn't who her mother had raised her to be. Right was right, even if no one else cared. Hours seemed to pass before a doctor emerged, his scrub stained with the fatigue of endless shifts. "Are you family?" he asked, scanning the nearly empty waiting room until his gaze landed on Maya. Her lips parted. She had no right to say yes, no claim to this man beyond a memory and a scar. But something in her heart pushed her forward. I was with him when it happened." "Is he okay?" The doctor's expression softened. "He's stable for now. Severe asthma attack, complicated by exhaustion. Another hour without intervention and it might have been too late. Whoever stayed with him probably saved his life." Maya exhaled shakily, her shoulders sagging. Relief washed over her, hot and overwhelming. "Can I see him?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The doctor hesitated, then nodded. "Just a few minutes. He needs rest." The room was dim when she entered. The only sound the steady beep of the heart monitor and the soft hiss of the oxygen machine. Ethan lay pale against the white sheets, his silvering hair damp against his forehead. The years had carved lines into his face, but his features still held a kind of quiet strength. She sat beside him, her hand hovering before she finally let it rest gently on his. His eyes fluttered open, glazed at first, then slowly focusing. When he spoke, his voice was hoarse but steady. "You saved me." Maya shook her head quickly. "No, I only did what anyone should have done." His gaze sharpened, piercing. "But they didn't, only you." The truth of his words silenced her. She swallowed hard, unable to answer, the memory of all those indifferent faces flashing in her mind. Before she could find her voice, the door swung open. An older woman entered, tall, elegant, wrapped in a tailored coat with pearls glinting at her throat. Her presence filled the room, commanding and cold. She rushed to Ethan's side, her relief palpable, until her eyes landed on Maya. In an instant, her face hardened, her gaze like ice. "And who is this?" the woman demanded, her tone sharp enough to cut. Ethan's lips moved, weak but insistent. "Mother, this is the woman who saved me." His words hung heavy in the air. Maya froze, realization slamming into her. Mother. This wasn't just a man she had saved. This was someone important, someone from a world far beyond her own. And now, standing across from her, was his mother, a woman whose approval or disdain could crush her like an insect. Maya felt the weight of both futures pressing down, the life she had sacrificed at Grand Central, and this new, unpredictable path that had just opened before her. She straightened her shoulders, her heart pounding, knowing that whatever came next would test her more than she had ever imagined. The choice at the station. Maya Williams pressed the resume folder tight against her chest, her heart beating like a frantic drum. The edges of the paper were already soft from her constant handling, but she could not let go of it. That folder was her hope, her promise, her chance. In less than 1 hour, she had an interview at Grant & Spencer Law Associates, one of the most respected firms in the city. If she got the job, it would mean stability, security, and a future for her little girl, Ella. She stood at the entrance of Grand Central Station, rain dripping from her umbrella, watching the crowd spill in waves across the polished floor. The station roared with life, voices echoing, shoes slapping against marble, trains screeching into place, and the endless drone of announcements. She inhaled deeply, trying to steady her nerves. "Just breathe, Maya," she whispered to herself. "This is it. Don't mess this up." Her reflection caught in the glass doors, tired eyes, curls tucked neatly beneath a simple black headscarf, a second-hand blazer pressed as best as she could. She had chosen her outfit carefully, ironing it 3 times. It wasn't expensive, but it was clean, professional, and respectable. She had rehearsed answers to interview questions 100 times, often whispering them to herself while doing dishes or tucking Illa into bed. This job wasn't just a job. It was freedom. Freedom from overdue bills, from the landlord's threats, from the guilt of telling her daughter, "Not this month, baby." She tightened her grip on the folder and stepped into the flow of the station. She had timed everything. The 4:15 train would get her to Midtown with 15 minutes to spare, enough time to smooth her blazer, calm her shaking hands, and walk into the building with her head held high. But fate never follows human plans. As Maya wove through the crowd, her ears picked up something, an odd wheezing like someone gasping underwater. She turned her head and saw him, a man slumped on a bench near the arrivals board, his face pale, chest rising in shallow, broken jerks. His expensive gray coat was drenched from the rain, his hand trembling around a small inhaler that had slipped from his grasp and rolled onto the slick floor. Maya froze. For a moment, she thought someone else would help. Hundreds of people were streaming past. Someone had to stop, right? But no one did. A woman in a business suit slowed, gave a quick glance, then shook her head with a dismissive frown. "Not my problem," she muttered. A man in a Yankees cap chuckled as he passed. "Lady, you'll miss your train. Don't waste your time." Their words pierced like knives, cruel, cold, indifferent. Maya's chest tightened. She had seen this before. How the world turned its eyes away from someone in need. How people hardened themselves with excuses. Her heart screamed at her to move, but her mind whispered, "Don't. You can't afford this." Not today. Not now. The announcement cut through her thoughts. Final boarding for the 4:15 express to Midtown. Doors closing. Her breath caught. The 4:15, her train, her interview. Her chance. She clutched her folder tighter. If she helped him, she might miss the interview. If she missed the interview, there would be no second chance. Jobs like this didn't wait. She could not risk her daughter's future, but then His eyes opened. Weak, terrified eyes locking on hers. His lips barely moved, but she heard it clear as thunder. Help me. The plea broke through every wall, every excuse. Maya's feet moved before her mind decided. She dropped her folder, papers spilling across the wet floor, and knelt beside him. "Sir, can you hear me?" she cried, her voice trembling. He wheezed, struggling, clutching at his chest. The inhaler slipped further away, kicked aside by a passing shoe. "Don't worry, I've got you," Maya said. Though her own hands were shaking, she grabbed the inhaler, pressed it to his lips, but his hands trembled too violently to hold it steady. Panic clawed at her throat. She dialed 911 with trembling fingers. "There's a man down at Grand Central," she gasped. "He can't breathe. Please send help." The dispatcher's voice crackled back. "Stay calm, ma'am. Keep him conscious if you can. Help is on the way." Okay, Maya whispered, forcing her voice steady. "Sir, listen to me. You're going to be fine. Just stay with me." The crowd still streamed past. Some smirked. Some muttered. No one stopped. Maya gritted her teeth, fury burning in her chest. "Come on, sir," she said, sliding her arms under his shoulders. He was heavy, his weight almost too much for her small frame, but she heaved with everything she had. "I'm not leaving you here." "Crazy woman." Someone shouted behind her. "You'll get yourself hurt." Ignoring them, Maya staggered toward the exit, half carrying, half dragging him. Rain lashed against her face as they stumbled into the street. A yellow cab screeched, stopping just inches away, horn blaring. "Watch where you're going," the driver shouted, then sped off. Maya shielded the man with her body, chest heaving. "You're okay. You're okay," she panted, though she wasn't sure if it was true. Then, something caught her eye. A faint burn scar trailing across his wrist, half hidden beneath his cuff. Her breath caught. Memory jolted through her like lightning. A smoky apartment in Brooklyn. Flames licking the walls. Her mother coughing, collapsing. Strong arms lifting her and her mother through the fire. She was only 9 years old. She remembered the name whispered after the stranger who had saved them. Ethan Hale. Her knees buckled. Could it be? After all these years? The wail of sirens cut through her thoughts. An ambulance screeched to the curb. EMTs rushed out, lifting the man onto a stretcher, strapping an oxygen mask over his face. Maya climbed in without permission, clutching his hand. To her shock, his fingers gripped hers, surprisingly strong despite his struggle. "Don't leave," he rasped. "I won't," Maya whispered, tears stinging her eyes. The ambulance doors slammed shut. The city blurred outside the windows as they sped toward the hospital. Maya's folder, her papers, her chance lay scattered on the station floor.